Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Well, breaking his silence finally. President Biden has spoken. Did he take blame? Did the buck stop here? Oh, no. He doubled down on his decision to leave Afghanistan, and he played the blame game for the horrific fallout. So why was no one prepared for the rapid Taliban takeover? Both Republicans and Democrats are demanding answers. Meanwhile, the world is witnessing horrendous images of desperate Afghans trying to flee, some clinging to the fuselage of a plane and then falling to their deaths. CBN's Jenna Browder has more from Washington.
After a full day of dramatic images of Afghans trying to flee, President Biden addressed the nation Monday. And while he stuck to his decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan, he offered no explanation for why the U.S. wasn't prepared for the rapid collapse. Chaos and desperation at the Kabul airport. Thousands of Afghans crowding the runway, surrounding this massive military jet, clinging to the outside of the fuselage, some of them falling to their deaths. Inside, 640 of the lucky. The Taliban announcing they're now in full control of Afghanistan. The outcry over those scenes forcing President Biden to come down from Camp David and talk to the American people.
I stand squarely behind my decision.
The president blaming the rapid fall of Afghanistan on the Afghan government and military.
The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight.
And his predecessor.
When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban.
On Capitol Hill, few lawmakers, Republican or Democrat, are defending Biden.
What we have seen is an unmitigated disaster, a stain on the reputation of the United States of America.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell adding that the country could once again become a safe harbor for terrorists.
Every terrorist around the world, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Africa, are cheering the defeat of the United States military by a terrorist organization.
Even top Democrats are critical. Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Mark Warner issuing a statement calling for an investigation into the collapse. I hope to work with the other committees of jurisdiction to ask tough but necessary questions about why we weren't better prepared for a worst-case scenario involving such a swift and total collapse of the Afghan government and security forces. There are also growing concerns over human rights, especially for women and girls. Biden says he'll continue to speak up for them, but many worry that won't be enough. In an effort to calm the population, the Taliban is offering amnesty and inviting women to be a part of their government. At the same time, there are reports of girls as young as 15 being forced to marry Taliban fighters. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
It's a horrible stain. And the buck does stop with the number one man. You know, former Secretary of Defense Gates said, I've known him for many years, and Joe Biden has never made one right decision on foreign policy. Every time, everything he's enunciated has been wrong. And this is a disaster, and he's trying to put the blame on somebody else, and it makes you sick at your stomach. Well, senior international correspondent George Thomas has made several trips to Afghanistan since the U.S. invasion. He joins us now. George, the Taliban treatment of women has been horrific. What's this move about inviting them to join the government? Is that for real?
Yeah, exactly. Is that for real? We both know that is not for real. This is window dressing, Pat. Wait for the between 5,000 to 10,000 Americans to finally be evacuated from Afghanistan. Wait for the 6,000 troops that are now controlling the Hamid Karzai International Airport, as well as the other NATO troops. Trust me, once all of our forces are out, all of our Americans are out, then the real crackdown begins. This is window dressing. There is no way. This is a 7th century medieval group that believes that women are second-class citizens. There is no way that they're going to allow women to participate in the governing process in Afghanistan. Today, Pat, a few dozen Afghan women took to the streets of Kabul, the capital city, demanding that they would have access to medical care. They would have access to education. They'd be able to work in some of these places that were manned by women. Afghan Taliban forces went in and told them to go home. The reality is that in the next few weeks, months, we are going to see the severity of this group and what they believe in. And this is Islamic Sharia law. Let's not kid ourselves. 20 years later, this is a group that wants to take vengeance. And in fact, there are reports today that over the last 20 years, the United States, as well as our coalition forces, created a biometric database of all the Afghan security forces that participated with coalition forces, as well as Afghan special forces, including NGOs, the non-governmental organizations that worked for the betterment of Afghanistan, including women, including Christians. The reports are that the Taliban now has the entire biometric data list. In fact, there are reports as we come on the air today that from Herat to Mazar-e-Sharif to Kandahar to Kabul, Taliban are going door to door, checking with them. They have in their hands the biometric information, looking for people, those who worked with the Afghan government and those who worked with the United States these past 20 years. This is no joke.
George, one last question. Biden has done something, it seems to me, rather foolish. He's putting more troops into the embassy. I mean, how are they ever going to get out?
Yeah. I mean, this is, the State Department yesterday said that they were preparing for all kinds of scenarios, but clearly you can see we only had about 2,500 troops prior to a few weeks ago. Suddenly we have this influx. If you are all concerned about getting troops out, why would you have this massive, influx of troops? This is going to be the challenge. And to tell you, Al-Qaeda today, from the streets of Sweden to Yemen to Saudi Arabia to Iraq to the desert sands of Morocco, all the way to Pakistan, Al-Qaeda and all of the various alphabet soups of terrorist organizations are praising what has happened. In fact, a major group that monitors traffic and chatter amongst the insurgent groups, the Al-Qaeda groups, said jihadists have portrayed the Taliban conquest of Afghanistan as a watershed event akin to the 9/11 events.
Thanks, George. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, the commander-in-chief is incompetent, and his military advisors may not be too competent either. But he did go against the advice of his senior leaders who warned him that this was not the right course. He went ahead and did it anyhow. And we have at the head of our government somebody who is just not with it. And boy, if there was ever a time to ask for God's mercy on America, that's it. But we are, unfortunately, you have to live under the actions of your leaders. And if it's wrong, then you have problems. And we have another problem that Biden and Kamala Harris have refused to acknowledge, and that is 1,500 migrants, all of them are COVID positive, have flooded into McAllen, Texas in just 1 week. And that's the tip of the iceberg. Hundreds of thousands of illegals are landing in American communities day after day, the highest number in 21 years. So when will the president do his job and secure our border? And until then, how much more at risk is the health of Americans? Here's our reporter, Tara Mergener, with that story.
In July alone, a record 210,000 migrants entered the U.S. along the border, often with the help of smugglers. Many of those putting their feet on American soil for the first time are said to be carrying COVID. Detention facilities out of space, agents overwhelmed, and border communities like McAllen, Texas, in a state of emergency.
It's an issue, and I keep on saying we shouldn't have to be dealing with.
As thousands of migrants per week, none vaccinated, make their first pit stop here.
In 1 week alone, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris released 1,500 illegal immigrants into McAllen who were COVID positive.
Across the entire southwest border, illegal crossings are at a 21-year high.
Judging from the number of people I'm seeing down here on Mexico's southern border in the city of Tapachula, those numbers could be about to get very much worse.
Swarms of people, including 19,000 plus unaccompanied children, turning themselves into agents in July.
Our drone video showing a massive group of illegal immigrants being held by Border Patrol under Anzalduas Bridge. It's the largest group we have ever seen.
Critics are sounding the alarm across the country, blaming Biden's border policies.
They will defend the illegal immigrants against the right of Americans.
Day after day, hundreds of thousands of migrants landing in communities across the nation via planes, trains, and automobiles.
Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you.
But those blips aren't going away given the Delta variant.
People are dying and will die who don't have to die.
And if anything, the Biden administration and the CDC are focusing on unvaccinated and unmasked Americans.
Something supersedes that need to do exactly what you want to do,
while almost ignoring the border crisis. Actions like that causing some on the left to call for the president to impose order on the increasingly out-of-control migration.
The Washington Post editorial board is as liberal as they come, probably the most liberal paper in the nation, competing with the New York Times. They know that this is a politically toxic issue.
And agencies on the border report as many as 1 in 5 migrants are showing up in the U.S. with COVID. The administration is reportedly preparing to help control it by offering them vaccines paid for by U.S. taxpayers. Pat?
Tara, what's behind this policy of sending thousands of these migrants to communities across the U.S.?
Well, Pat, that's the billion-dollar question. You know, Republicans, of course, insist President Biden is doing this for politics' sake. But the reality is once they're here, they've got to go somewhere. They are coming into the country, as you know, in enormous numbers. Officials say we are on track now for a record 2 million crossings this year. Border Patrol cannot keep them. They are not in custody. And once they're processed, they can go anywhere they want in the U.S., often unannounced. And these communities are getting stuck with the tab for whatever services they use there. And by the way, most of them do not have to appear in court anymore. So likely, COVID or not, they're going to remain here illegally and fade into the shadows. And now there is even more concern about terrorists coming through with the toppling of Afghanistan. Border Patrol has seen people coming in now from at least 70 countries so far, including places like Pakistan and China. Pat, there's talk terrorists will try to take even more advantage now with what's going on in Afghanistan coming through our border.
Tara, we appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, doesn't it make you just ask God, what have you done? We didn't vote in a bunch of incompetence. Was the election stolen? It may well have been. But how do we get somebody who is totally incompetent and who is slightly in his dotage to run this country? And this thing at the border, they're ignoring it. And Kamala Harris was given that responsibility, and she failed it miserably. We are, well, I don't know what's happening, but if there was ever a time to pray for America, we sure are looking at it now.